where we'll be discussing how organizations can traverse from their vision for a net zero to making it an actual reality for their businesses. I know Nitish was supposed to be joining this LinkedIn Live, but due to some personal commitments, I will be joining in his stead. I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation with a panel of amazing women who are so passionate about sustainability and climate change impact. And I'll quickly start us off with the introductions. I'm Ambika Kinney, a senior analyst with the Sustainability Technology and Services practice at Everest Group, where we drive extensive research and conversations around ESG. The environmental aspect includes net zero and climate risk, but we also cover the social aspect that includes topics like diversity and inclusion and accessibility. I'm joining in from India, and it's a pleasant afternoon for me. Folks joining us from across the globe, do let us know where you all are tuning in from. And I have with me today Arpita, who's a practice director at Everest Group. She leads the Charter for Sustainability and Talent, and she's shepherding a lot of the good research work we're doing at Everest Group with regards to this space. Arpita, would you like to add on to that?
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Ambika. And yes, at Everest Group, we have been passionately covering the sustainability, technology, and services space with a lot of good research and a lot of good conversations. Happy to be having this wonderful discussion, especially with Babish on the call with us. Uh, Back to you, Ambika.
So, as Arpita mentioned, we're being joined by a very special guest today, Babish, with a keen expertise in the legal and the regulatory aspects of sustainability and climate change. She has decades of experience in shaping outsourcing and transformation businesses globally. Babish, would you like to introduce yourself to the audiences quickly?
Yes, thank you very much for having me in the first place. I think the best and easiest introduction for today is the sustainability services practice I have set up within Accenture for the last 3 years. I'm no longer within Accenture, by the way, but Everest has helped me a lot with strategically determining where we should take Accenture as a company on the sustainability field and area and help us setting us targets. So I'm happy to discuss today's topics for other companies to provide them support in the same journey.
Thank you so much, Babish, for doing this with us. This is indeed such an important conversation. We're facing an unprecedented climate crisis, right? And engaging in these conversations around net zero is essential to develop actionable solutions that can help enterprises mitigate these consequences and secure a sustainable future for generations to come. And as we go ahead, I request the audiences to please put down any questions or comments or thoughts you might have in the chat that you'd want us to address, right? Governments across the globe, they've come together to agree upon the dire need to limit the impact of climate change, and net zero initiatives have now become a board level agenda for several large organizations, and medium and small organizations are following suit as well, right? Given how the regulations are evolving to broaden their scope and include them in the mandates as well. So enterprises are planning to embark on their net zero transition, creating their ESG vision to establish themselves as, institutions taking responsible actions for people and planet, and eventually help them to become an enabler of sustainability for their customers, for their ecosystem partners, and for the communities that they're working with, right? When it comes to net zero, we of course don't want to limit ourselves to carbon. Rather, we want to talk about its impact on a holistic level, how it can affect people's fundamental needs and health and safety of communities. Right. So, on this note, Babish, I'd like to pose you a question. How do you see the conversations around net zero evolving at a macro level? How are the regulatory authorities responding to this crisis?
Yeah, I think at a macro level, for me, the first important topic are the facts. And then we talk really about the scientific data. I think it's very relevant that people continue to understand what is the right information as go-to information and go-to data on this topic if you want to understand the factual state. And then I think the report of the United Nations and the IPCC which is the formal scientific forum in the world to assess and understand what the situation of climate change is. They published a report last week. And there, in particular, you see immediately as key finding that the efforts we're putting in are enormous and are impactful and are successful. I think that's been underestimated in newspapers and discussions, that what we are doing is having an impact. The unfortunate bit is that it's not yet enough. So that's the second key finding of the report, that if we continue with a lot of emissions, if that is still growing, and we know from the oil and gas industry that there's not a real temptation yet to really reduce in the right way or in an efficient way, which has the right impact. At the same time, I think people need to understand that for the facts, it's not just the extreme weather events. I think for some people, climate change has become equivalent to extreme weather events. So the heat waves, the droughts, the hurricanes, the flooding, that's what we see as climate change. But I think we need to broaden that scope, because ultimately those weather events have a huge impact on, for example, food security in the world. It has an impact on health of people. And in particular, in relation to those two, and also we've seen last week, for example, the price of sugar going up, again, because of drought and no rain in certain places in the world where the trade and the sugar is coming from. So I think broaden the topic in your mind. It's not just weather, it's food security, it's therefore safety, it's health of people. And in particular, and as unfortunately this generation now again knows what the word war means, conflicts and war. And I think also climate change, for those who are in the science of climate change, understand that it's a catalysator, huge catalysator for a lot of conflict. Because as soon as water or clean air and all kind of other resources are becoming scarce, you do see conflict appearing at borders, at lakes, at many places in the world already. And that would also then again lead to a lot of climate refugees, which again means a lot of political choices to be made and again rise to conflict. So I think it's a very broad topic where we need to understand that the facts are not making us very happy, or it's still a big incentive to start acting. And you mentioned why would you do this today? And people talk about the environment and health of people today. But I think ultimately, always when it comes to this topic, it's the choices we make today that determine the future of our children and grandchildren. You may have heard of the climate court case by the Portuguese children. There's a group of young children in Portugal, and they went to the European Court of Justice for Human Rights, and they had their hearing a couple of weeks ago, and they're suing 32 member states of the EU. And in fact, the dates we talk about, the 2050 date, but also the 2100 date, end of this century. For us, they are, at least for me, I'm maybe a little bit older than the two of you, but for me, it sounds very far away. But if you're now a teenager, those dates are not far away dates. They are your life. They are where you will be in the middle of your life, making it all happen. So I think that we should not forget either, the intergenerational value of our decisions today. And whether you're in a corporate or whether you're in the government or whether you're a citizen who's also making choices every day on this topic, which will impact other people's lives.
Very true, Babish, and thank you for highlighting that, right? And that's the message we take in our conversations to the market as well. So, as the consumers and the citizens become more active in the space, as they understand the space more, they'll be asking enterprises a lot more questions, right? And it is high time that enterprises stop looking at ESG as three isolated aspects. They need to talk about how to integrate the environmental and the social aspect of it. Currently, from our research, we understand that almost 35% of the sustainability services engagements are related to the people aspect. But as we go ahead, after the pandemic and as the landscape changes, we see more and more people related services coming up and more demand for these kind of services as well, right? So, on that note, there seems to be somewhere a gap in the need to take care of your sustainability commitments and the ability to do so, right? A lot of enterprises are facing challenges in adhering to the commitments that they have publicly made or sticking to the timelines that they have given out publicly, right? And there are several reasons for these, and there are several kind of challenges, be it supply chain disruptions or economic concerns or budgetary concerns that they might be facing, right? Or it could be something related to getting the right stakeholder buy-in. So Babish and Arpita, I'm going to come to you with this question as well. How do you guys see this evolving, right? What are the key challenges that enterprises are facing while trying to stick to their sustainability and ESG commitment?
Yeah. Well, if I think back to my own journey again within Accenture in 2019, I felt the need to really become active on climate change after seeing and hearing more about it and reading about it. At the time, I wrote a letter, a personal letter to our CEO, Julie Sweet, to understand what does Accenture going to do? What are the plans for the next 10 years? Because I think in the first challenge is probably not only the complexity of the topic. You may know that they call climate change a hyper object. And hyper objects are those things that human beings will never be able to fully understand. So you might get to your 95%, but there's still always a matter of uncertainty and not knowing. So it's very complex, but it's also really requires long-term plans. There is no effort for climate change if you do it 1 or 2 years. It needs to be long term. And what we used there, it was very much, we started off with awareness and a little bit awareness around or along the same lines as I just mentioned. It is understanding the broadness of the topic. So we did, for example, a 3-hour session with all our employees worldwide to help them in a sort of it was sort of a game, a puzzle and a game. So with a team, you need to get to a mosaic, a puzzle, and complete that puzzle in 3 hours while understanding all of the impacts, causes, issues of climate change. After those 3 hours, literally every person in the session was totally depressed. So that was not very helpful in the sense that it was a negative feeling they ended with. But very often after we took a next session to understand, because then sort of the negative feeling went a bit away. And then we start looking, okay, this is really needed to act upon. And so after the awareness, you got to the creation of people wanting to act. And of course, for everybody, it's different why you want to act upon this. Do you feel it's very needed and serious and you take it to your heart, or whether you just think it's a great window of opportunity to make my business look good? Whatever the reasons are, you see then the acting. And I think the complexity also is that you need to embed it in every part of your organization. So it's of course in your supply chain, in operations, because that is where your resources management, your emissions, your waste topics are playing at heart. So I think that is also critical, that it's in legal, in procurement, in HR, in your strategy department, literally in every department, you need to embed it and embrace it. So what we also very often advise to all of our clients, make sure that you have the right person owning it. And for a large corporate, that means a chief sustainability officer. Yes, a C-level person in the board covering these topics. Because in fact, for every decision, you need to have the right data on climate and environment and social implications. And every step you take from now on with your company, you need to be focused on those elements, on planet, people, and profit. Because of course, your business continues as usual. You still need to be making money, but at the same time, you need to understand all the time the impact on planet and people. So I think that was the journey we embarked. And be fair to yourself, be humble. It's going to be long, it's going to be complex, but it's also a very nice journey to explore and to fail in and to fix fast. So not very easy for a lot of companies. Definitely it was also not easy for Accenture. Failing and fixing fast because nobody has the answer yet. It's plural pathways, as we say, or what I've been taught at the University of Sussex when doing a Master of Science on this topic. You have to explore different ways. It's not like phase out fossil fuel and you're done. No, we do need nuclear energy. We do need renewable energy. We need the sun. We need the wind. It's all of it together and finding together the right mix.
Yes, very true. It's a space that is worth exploring, worth failing, and in the end, we're all going to win, right? So, Vavish mentioned a lot of aspects of sustainability-related concerns that enterprises have, right? So, just a quick question for the audience: please let us know what are some key concerns that your organizations are facing or highlighting, and what is your organization doing to deal with those concerns, right? And Babish, you mentioned how the imperative is on enterprises to embed that culture of sustainability into their employees and their workforce and in their talent to make them understand the importance of what you're doing, right? And Arpita, I know we've done some work around those lines as well. So, how important do you feel is the culture when it comes to enterprises combating sustainability? And how do enterprises generally go about it?
Sure, Amita. And first of all, I would like to align completely with the challenges that Babish mentioned. And currently, what enterprises need to focus on is to have a bias towards action, right? There are a lot of targets being set, claims being made, 2030 targets, 2050 targets. And most of these organizations do not have the right roadmap or pathway in their mind to achieve those targets. Most of these organizations might not be able to deliver on these targets, right? So there is a clear need of bias towards action that is required in the industry. And based on our conversations, and I think I'd like to mention our net zero consulting services peak matrix assessment highlights the importance of the consulting service providers in helping enterprises accelerate their net zero journeys. So, based on the queries and the trends that we're seeing in the market, we at Everest Group decided to go ahead and launch a peak matrix assessment to understand the service provider ecosystem when it comes to net zero consulting services. And we wanted to keep our scope as broad as possible, not just limiting ourselves to carbon, but across all the three ESG targets, be it identifying the current state of the enterprises, how they benchmark them, how to benchmark an enterprise's current state against the peers in the industry, what are the current gaps in their sustainability journeys, and building the right roadmaps and pathways for them so that they're able to accelerate their net zero journeys. And if we look at the, and I think again this brings us to the point that Babish mentioned, that sustainability and net zero as an ecosystem is not something that an enterprises can do alone. You need the help of consulting service providers, you need assistance from technology service providers. Considering it's such an operationally heavy industry, you also need support from OEMs, etc. Right? So it's more not, I wouldn't call it a competitive ecosystem. I would call sustainability more of a cooperative ecosystem where all of these entities within the industry need to come together to help organizations accelerate their sustainability pathways. And I think if we look at the results of our peak matrix assessment, we have categorized the participants across leaders, major contenders, and aspirants, and we see some of the leading logos, be it the big fours or the MBBs of the world, doing amazing work when it comes to building their net zero consulting offerings. These organizations, how they are helping their clients is helping them understand how their what their sustainability journeys currently lack right now, help them navigate the pathway better to attain their final ESG targets. Ambika, I
So,
think you have been very closely working on this peak metrics assessment. Do you want to highlight some of our findings from the report?
sure, sure, Arpita. But before we do that, we have a pretty interesting comment from Noel at this point. He says the big issue I see with clients is obtaining and assuring the operational data to support the sustainability agenda and the tsunami of ESG reporting requirements, right? And that is something we've been hearing from a lot of the buyers that we've been talking to as well. How does the service provider actually ensure that the data that I'm collecting or reporting is, credible and something that I can go to the market with without risking being called someone who greenwashes, given the legal risk that is associated with it, right? So, Arpita, would you like to take this up?
Definitely, Ambika, and I think this completely aligns with our findings as well. So, the most important use case in net zero consulting services was ESG data management from across the organizations. We pick any service provider logo from that peak matrix that we just presented, and what is the most in demand use case that they are experiencing from their clients? It's ESG data management. When it comes to ESG data, there are quite a bit of challenges apart from scope 1 and scope 2, especially when it comes to scope 3, considering that 80% of your emissions almost are coming from scope 3 emissions, right? And we saw that more than 89% of these engagements required scope 3 as one of the key areas where enterprises required assistance from service providers to help report on this data. And how they are helping these providers do it is, again, that brings me to that cooperative ecosystem part. We have technology providers building end-to-end ASG data platforms that can integrate very well with your existing ERP ecosystem or CRM ecosystem, and help you pull and integrate all of that isolated siloed data from across your organization to bring it together to make sense out of that data, and not just data from your within your enterprise, data from suppliers, data from ecosystem, data from your partners, data from your customers. Even the industry data is a lot of ESG data platforms, ESG data providers are bringing offerings that can help you understand how you can best use the data that is available in the market to benchmark yourself, or uh, to to do the compliance requirements that your particular organization needs. And especially, if I can just quote, I think recently we saw one of the offering from Deloitte, Salesforce, and AT&T, where they have launched a software where the software helps you understand which are the regulations that are applicable to you, no matter which geography you are a part of, which industry you're a part of, what is the size of your company. They help you understand what are the regulations that apply to you in that particular geography, so that you can more proactively cater to the data challenge when it comes to net zero. So a lot of action happening in the ecosystem. But Ambika, do you want to add anything based on your observations and conversations with these buyers also?
Yes, yeah, sure. So adding on to that, right, a lot of apart from the service providers, a lot of tech and platform players are coming into the picture as well, and they bringing innovative solutions to help enterprises propagate their journey, to propagate their idea of sustainability. So what a lot of them are doing is they are helping these enterprises get their suppliers on board with ESG data management initiatives. Sometimes, just to quote an example, they sometimes go to the suppliers of these enterprises with a free version of their software so that they're able to collect data from them as well. So making the ESG data management collection more holistic, ensuring that the suppliers are brought into the picture as well, is really helping a lot of enterprises on the reporting aspect of it, right? That being said, we did have a lot of key market observations from the net zero consulting services peak, as you mentioned, Arpita, right? The main one being that the scope 3 emissions, and tracking of those is what is responsible for driving growth in sustainability services, right? And even though there's a backdrop of some macroeconomic uncertainty and inflationary pressures, enterprises are looking to go ahead with these kind of initiatives and invest as far as they see a sweet spot between sustainability being a value creator and a sustainability being a cost center, right? And Babish, this is where I'd like to loop you in. How do you think service providers can help enterprises understand that sustainability is not just a cost center, right? It will help you drive the top line growth and it will help you drive profits as well.
Yeah, I think it is. It depends on your ability to handle ambiguity, as our people within the former workplaces mentioned a lot. It's on the one hand, people see it only as a cost driver, where if you're transforming, for example, the products you're having, there can also be a big profitable side to it. But I think what Noel is pointing out, and I hope that is the call for action today as well. There is a tsunami, and I like the word, Noel, of ESG reporting requirements in Europe. So we are the first with our carbon border adjustment mechanism. That means if you were used as a company to get your products from elsewhere, where the CO2 emissions were taking place, you now need to report on a set of products, which can be very important for your industry or your business. You need to explain whether any emissions were paid for in other countries outside of the EU. And if that was not the case, you need to pay it when it's being imported. That has a huge impact on the profitability of certain companies. Or, for example, I know a coffee company that really realized they had to change the cups from being from aluminium. They had to change that into a renewable, sustainable, wasteless product. So it's also creating a lot of innovation. That's also what the EU Green Deal predicts, that a lot of the regulation is also supposed to stimulate, and I see examples where it does, innovation in itself. And I really don't like to say it, but I think sustainability, you cannot really have the impact you want to have today without the advisors, without consultants on the different topics. And Arpita and I discussed before that you have your peak assessment matrix, so you see who are the best players in the market to go to. But we also said underneath those players, there's a whole ecosystem of providers to help you navigate through that jungle. And you mentioned Deloitte as an example for regulatory requirements. Another has the best places to go to for your carbon calculations. Because I think 4 years ago, we really didn't expect so much pressure on scope 3 emissions yet. At the same time, we have in the Netherlands the Shell court case, as people may know. And there it was definitely the entire supply chain, and it was also leaning towards scope 3. They go into appeal for that, but at the same time, the sentiment in the society has changed. And we have a civil law system in most countries in Europe, which means that what society finds reasonable, that is what the judge is going and the court is going to use. So I think where originally 3 years, 4 years ago, sustainability would not be a topic where you could be sued for mismanagement, we now see in the UK, the first Shell case, 11 directors are in court because they are being accused of mismanagement. And then what is the claim? That also corporates, companies need to adhere to the commitments in the Paris Treaty and need to align their efforts to it. So I think people really need to understand you need to be able, whether you're small or big, and of course it needs to be proportionate, but you have to be able to show a long-term plan and effort. It's not the results per se. We're not there yet. But it's efforts you need to show and your plans. And therefore you need the right advisors and the right ecosystem to navigate in.
Yeah,
If
as
I
we
could
like to put
just
it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one
Yeah, go
point to
ahead.
that. Another key element that consulting service providers or the advisors are bringing in is helping build the business case for sustainability, right? There's a lot of, I think Ambika mentioned, Babish mentioned, there's a lot of conversation around cost centric aspects of sustainability. But with the right service providers, they can help you understand what are the key KPIs you need to measure, what are the key metrics you need to track, and how the performance on that matrix need to be understood so that you are able to build a more stronger business case for sustainability. Yes, you will start seeing the eventual results in the long term, but I think the smaller wins can provide the right momentum that is currently required in the sustainability space. Sorry, Ambika, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and now I
No,
want to say about Nicole's comment, because again, maybe we take too much of the negative side, the regulatory jungle, and it's all complex. But I think this is really spot on what Nicole is saying. This is it. It becomes it will increase your profit. It is a customer and talent magnet. I think that's very clear. We do not need to convince any young people that this is of relevance. So I have myself 3 kids, they're in their 20s and they're setting up their own businesses. No youngster today sets up any startup. Nobody starts a company without being absolutely certain and clear that it's fit for the future. That doesn't mean they take the approach of regulatory requirements. It means they take an approach of, for example, zero waste, because they feel naturally that that is the right approach. They don't look at the law, they say it needs to be that. So that is also the case for a lot of customers. They start to disbelieve the green images of several companies, and they really want to be helped and steered towards the right and just companies that are really green, or at least putting the efforts in to become green and greener. And that's the journey. And I think that innovation engine, which I did mention before, but also the talent magnet. Don't forget that there's still a war for talent. And if you want to be the company that attracts the right talent, then you need to be a sustainable company.
very true. So, in fact, we analyzed above 8,000 net zero consulting services engagements for the peak, right? And over 38% of them were valued at 1 million US dollars or more. So we see a very strong potential for large standalone net zero engagements, right? Enterprises are taking this seriously and they're here to take action on it, right? And service providers and consulting and IT service providers recognize this as well. So we see a lot of them reorganizing to build a dedicated sustainability service line in the coming 2 to 3 years if they haven't already done it, right? And they come to market with a lot of innovative solutions around ESG data management, energy monitoring and reporting, climate data simulations and predictions, and green operations, etc., right? And Arpita, this is where I'd like to bring you in. So we see a lot of service providers, introducing new solutions, but a lot of service providers, rebranding their existing solutions as well. So would you like to put some light on that?
Sure, definitely, Ambika. So I think the approach that we are seeing from service providers is again to have that right pitch that aligns with the that aligns with what the clients want, right? Your messaging can be just around regulatory compliance, or your messaging can be around the long-term benefits that these initiatives are going to provide to your industry. And for the clients that are quite hesitant with large investments in the short run, the approach that we are seeing from majority of the service providers is to implement and embed the element of sustainability in their existing offerings, right? So you might have, for example, you might have a facility management offering. You're using IoT and sensors and everything to make your corporate buildings and everything more automated, more digitalized. But how can you implement an element of sustainability in it so that the energy efficiency part is also captured? How do you bring in an element of that through in this asset management offering? We will also help you incorporate footprint management for your operations, right? So the approach that we are seeing from a lot of service providers is to imbibe the element of sustainability in their already existing offerings, be it this was just one example. Other examples could be, I think we have a slide presented where across industries we have highlighted what are the key use cases that are experiencing very high demand when it comes to net zero and sustainability. So for example, in manufacturing, that there are conversations happening around smart manufacturing. When it comes to BFSI, that's again a very high action industry where we're seeing a lot of happening around ESG risk assessment. When it comes to retail, again, there's one thing to attract the right talent. Retail companies are also taking net zero messaging to attract the right customers as a marketing opportunity to build differentiation in the market. And if I quickly talk about what is the current state of the market, the size of the market, we see sustainability services as almost a $50 billion plus opportunity. And I think no surprises there that Europe being the most mature geography. And I think post this, I'll take Babish's view on it on how we see this evolving. But Europe continues to be the more mature geography, and it is expected because the kind of regulations and compliance requirements in Europe are more mature. So the use cases in general that we are seeing in Europe are much more mature in terms of complexity when you compare it with other locations. But that said, North America is catching up very fast with all the directives being launched by the SEC, and that's why the potential growth in terms of for the services we see is going to be higher in North America. But that said, even the rest of the world, I think Babish already highlighted other geographies, be it India, China, Russia. They're also doing a lot of be it the political situations or be it voluntary reporting. A lot of action is happening in these geographies also. Babish, do you want to comment on how do we Europe? Yes, has been the most mature when it comes to regulations, but how do you see that evolving in the short to midterm?
I do feel that we will be ahead for quite a while still in Europe because it takes time to get to the regulation. And we now have ready and effective regulation. And I think also, as through the comments in the chat, I had not expected that the regulation as such from the EU Green Deal would be such an engine for change. Because I felt companies are used to reporting, but at the same time, I think it's the carbon tariffs, which I just mentioned with the border adjustment mechanism. I think it's regulation that directly impacts your profitability. And because of that, there are no companies who are not going to adhere. So you will wake up suddenly. It's a wake up call regulation. And so it really gets those over the line who are not yet active or not really willing to become active on sustainability or not in such an integral, holistic way in their entire companies. I did say, I did mention, I think the world is catching up very quickly, the rest of the world. North America is also creating a lot of legislation. And I think the Shell case, which I briefly mentioned at the beginning there, is also having a huge impact. And why do I say these court cases have such impact? There has been a review how quickly it changes as the number one topic in the boardroom. And we have a slide on it where you see the different countries, what is the top three in their boards. So I think here the court cases, because of the huge amount of penalties and damages to be paid, which is backward looking in a way, but the court cases are also steering the companies with new commitments, binding commitments for the future. So I have a feeling that this is a paradigm shift where legislation, court cases, probably never had the impact in the entire history on a topic of change. Because if you can be sued and it goes 30 years backwards and 30 years ahead, well, you can imagine it's going to be extremely costly, but it's also going to be enormously effective on how you're going to organize your business and how you're going to implement whatever rule there is on sustainability. Because if you're on the spot, you're also losing your reputation, like I think big oil in the California state, for example, now is. And the nice thing, or why I like it, these are court cases being discussed in the board across industry. So I think if you want to be fit for the future, it's not, I think we will steer away in 5 years' time. It's not all eyes on big oil anymore. The next industries are the travel industry as a whole, and the airplanes, flying, travel as a whole, but also the food industry. I think most people who are knowledgeable about these topics, it is the food system that is causing a lot of harm. It's the abundance of what we eat and drink. It is the waste that it generates. It's all of these topics coming together. So there are already food companies being sued as well. I think Cargill is a good example, Procter and Gamble. So that is starting as well. And I think the most concern for these companies is the reputational risk. And I think they should be concerned because their reputation is at risk, and society is changing on, are we allowing this or are we going to end it? We have many cases in the Netherlands around air pollution. Yeah, you talk about factories who were getting prizes and awards for the last decades, and universities wanted to work with them. Tata Steel is a very good example. Originally, every university wanted to cooperate with them. They're now in the Netherlands being boycotted. There is no university who wants to work with Tata Steel. And you can say, is your cooperation with the scientific world that relevant? Well, I think it is relevant, but more relevant is the fact that in the newspapers, people can read that those cooperations have ended. That's impactful.
That's where I think, Babish, the business case for sustainability is not just about profits, it's also about the reputational risks. It can go either way, right? If on the
Yeah.
negative side, there are consequences of not reporting or not complying and brand reputation issues, but on the positive side, there's really a lot of opportunity in the market to build that value proposition of a sustainable company at the core, or a purpose driven organization, and build your own competitive differentiation in the space.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, when we talk about sustainability, what enterprises do is they look externally. They look at their supply chains, they look at their suppliers and their operations with them. But they need to remember the one of the key aspects of sustainability is also what they're doing internally, right? Their own operations have to be green as well. So options around sustainable IT, right? And what we can do with the tech that we're using internally as well, right? So if we're using, for example, AI and automation to ease our business operations, what are the carbon emissions that are associated with those technologies and tools that we're using, right? And Babish, I'd like to hear from you on this. Are you seeing conversations around how technology is sort of impacting the overall carbon emissions of enterprises, and how are they sort of working towards reducing them?
Yeah, I think I said before, I hate to say it, but I don't think we can do this entire transformation, this systemic change without technology. Originally, I was hoping we could, because there's also a sustainability angle to the use of IT software, and ensuring that it's green software. So that's a whole topic in itself, especially also with AI, of course, becoming immensely popular. I think also for the right reasons. I have just started to support a company that is working on climate GPT, which will be launched soon. It's type of data which every company and every government and every court needs to be able to take the right decisions going forward. So I don't think we can combat climate change without the right data, scientific data, data sets, which are then going to be generated by AI into the right information. So ultimately, I don't think we can do without. And I think Scott Campbell, I see here you also talk about synthetic data being needed. I think that's totally true as an enabler. At the same time, it's also worrying that climate change is still a topic of debate, of bias, and still today we have people who do not believe in climate change. And it differs per region in the world, but that group is still existing. And that means that we still need a lot of convincing with the right data. But AI can also generate misinformation. So I have seen a lot of reports recently with footnotes, which really look scientific and academic, but they were not. Or the footnotes were not at all the right ones for the content. So I think it's also a topic to make sure if you're using AI and if you're using data, that the basis is the scientific data. So that would be my caveat definitely on this topic.
Very true. So harnessing technology and AI could potentially work against enterprises' net zero goals, right? In fact, there was this study by Harvard that stated that training a single BERT model, which is an LLM by Google, from scratch, it would require the same energy and carbon footprint as a commercial transatlantic flight. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of emissions being released, right? But then there are it's a risk reward trade off, right? There's a lot of transformative benefits that we can derive out of using, let's say, generative AI to sort of redefine how we're looking at sustainability, be it developing expertise via personalized learning experiences at the pace at which we're working and innovating, or just talking about the costs at which we're doing this. So, Arpita, what do you think? How do you see? Maybe let's talk about generative AI. How are these kind of emerging technologies helping enterprises, relook how they look at sustainability?
Sure, definitely, Ambika. And I think I slightly touched upon it in one of the previous questions. But to Babish's point, technology is turning out to be a key catalyst when it comes to sustainability. We talked about AI, generative AI, and if we for a second, if we do not look at the footprint, the kind of footprint or environmental impact the AI model itself might have, the potential and the possibilities with AI, IoT, blockchain, right? The kind of technologies that we're seeing in the market, the potential that they provide in terms of helping organizations become more sustainable. There's a lot of evidence in the market already, and we see a high adoption being done by the clients to make themselves more sustainable through these technologies. But that said, there are two lenses to it. That technology, how to use technology to the best of your advantage, which is tech for sustainability, but again making the tech itself more sustainable. And that's where I think this aspect comes into picture, that there needs to be more responsible coding, responsible design, architecture, even while building these IT systems, right? You need to understand how can you minimize the footprint of the product or the platform overall, so that you know you are able to shift the trade-off to more on the positive side rather than on the negative side.
Yeah, and this is the important part that service providers play, right? They help enterprises understand how to embark on the journey, understand the risk reward trade off when they're using technology to accomplish their net zero and sustainability goals, right? So, going back to the peak, Arpita, I want to, understand and let our audience even know about what kind, I mean, how, enterprises, when they're looking to partner with service providers, what are the key values or key factors that they're looking at, and what kind of feedback have we received from them when they're partnering with service providers?
Sure, definitely, Ambika. So, based on the peak matrix assessment, as part of the process, we also have a lot of conversations with the clients or the buyers of these services to understand what are the key aspects that differentiate one service provider or one advisor from another. And some of our observations in this area is some of the things that set a service provider apart is the industry expertise and the sustainability domain expertise, right? There are a lot of nuances that vary from industry to industry when it comes to sustainability and net zero, right? And that's why there is a strong inclination to collaborate with a provider that can bring in the right expertise when it comes to sustainability specific domains expertise, geography nuances they can bring into picture, industry specific nuances they can bring into picture, and then help them navigate the space better. The other aspect is around account management, how strategically you are able to assess the, so there is a knowledge gap. I think Babish already highlighted that in the first question. There's currently a knowledge gap, awareness gap, uh, currently existing when it comes to the buyer space, and that's why they're more keen to collaborate with providers who can help them bring the right knowledge and understanding and help them navigate the space better when it comes to sustainability. When it comes to critical factors, you can see on the slide that how leaders are standing out in technical expertise and value addition. So value addition in a way aligns to account management part. You need the advisors who can guide you with the right next steps, who can help you identify the right KPIs, who can help you quantify the impact better. And that's where value addition comes into picture. And the next aspect is around technical expertise. I think the just the question that we were discussing right now, with technology being at the center of these engagements, you need a provider that can bring in the right technology expertise to help you achieve your net zero targets. Ambika, do you want to add anything? I think you were part of most of these conversations. So, any quotes that you want to highlight from your experience?
Yeah, Arpita. So enterprises, depending on the level of maturity they're at, right now, they could be early into their sustainability journeys, or they're trying to figure out the space, or they could be at a much mature stage wherein they're trying to derive increasing ROI out of existing investments, or trying to make further investments into this channel. So depending on the level of maturity, they'll be looking at different factors from service providers. So if they're early into their journeys, they'll be looking more towards the talent aspect of it, the expertise that you bring in, and the softer aspects like change management and account management. Right? Change management again was a very important factor that was highlighted by a lot of buyers that we had a conversation with, because they need to be able to transition to the newer state that they want to be in, right? And the employees need to get accustomed to the newer practices and technologies that they'll be using in order to get to that stage. So, as I mentioned, change management was a very important aspect of it. Second was consulting expertise. So, again, helping enterprises contextualize sustainability to their businesses, and helping them understand what it meant, what are the regulations that are relevant for them, and what more could they do, right? Beyond the scope of the engagement, what more could they do to add more value to their employees, to their customers, and to the various stakeholders across the supply chain, right? So those were some factors that buyers really highlighted. So Pabish, over to you. What do you think enterprises should focus on while trying to look for the right kind of sustainability partner to help them, to help empower them on this net zero journey of theirs?
I think in the first place, you need to match your advisors. So if you're a corporate, I can imagine you go to the big advisors. But I think there's a lot of smaller businesses, mid-sized businesses. It really needs to yeah, make sense who you work together with. And I think it also depends a lot per country, per industry, who you want to work with. But at the same time, it's also try in the beginning not just one, or look at your competitors. Who have they worked with? And I think what struck me most when I started in this field some years ago is the difference in where are you in the journey. And you both have mentioned it already before. The maturity of the clients is very different. And I think the maturity of service providers, especially also if you look at smaller ones, is also very different. So in that sense, I think it depends on where you are in your journey, who you need. But more importantly, I have seen quite a lot of people from our Accenture teams moving into the client teams. So they really started working for that client, wanting to do the complete transformation, wanting to be on board of that full client journey. So leaving Accenture, going to the client. Also the other way around, of course. But I think it's typical what you see. And for me, the crux of this mentioning this last point is that you really need to have your knowledge inside your own company. So yes, you need advisors, but that's clearly not enough. You need to build the knowledge in your own organization, so you have it available at all times for, of course, a better price, and to make sure that you find the right tools from those service providers, the tools that Arpita already mentioned, but also to implement the right technology in your own organization. And you will need then temporarily a lot of advisors. Gradually, that will minimize or get reduced at least. And I think that's again where you need to envision the full journey and not just the starting point. And yes, it requires quite some investment in time and efforts. But what we saw within most of clients and also within Accenture, for example, it made a lot of people very enthusiastic and very engaged in their profession and in their daily life role.
Very true. So the paucity of talent is so striking that the talent wars are being waged not just between the enterprises but also between the service providers and enterprises, right? That is the stage that we're at. So, what other than technology do you think organizations should focus on when it comes to their sustainability journeys?
I think what came out of this session, and we're getting to the end now, it's the data. So I think the data sets, and I mentioned already that I'm working myself to support a company called Climate GPT. I think you need to make sure that your data is scientific, it's the right set of data for you, and that you create for yourself. So the technology you really need is a dashboard in your organization to take, including the right data, to take the right decisions at the right time. And I know there are quite a few service providers that are offering this. Of course, from experience, I know that the Accenture one best. I cannot really compare it, but it's really, it includes the Oracle knowledge, the Microsoft knowledge, the Google knowledge. I mean, within big tech, these are the places where people have developed for now the most in these dashboards area. So it's data and dashboards for your decisions. Make it 3Ds: data, decisions, and dashboards. I think that's what you really need. And you need, for your size of company, the right service provider to help you with that tool, because ultimately that is what you will need on every day in your business, for whatever the decision is going to be. Know what it means, your decision, for people, planet, and profit.
I love how you articulated that, Babish. That was a great point, right? And we just have a couple of minutes left. So, to the audience, if you have any last minute questions for us to address, please put them in the chats. Any thoughts or comments or feedback would be helpful as well. And before we conclude, Arpita, any final thoughts from you? That would be great.
Sure, I'll just add one more word: data, dashboards, decision, and finally action. I think I started the conversation with it, but what the industry really needs right now is bias towards action. And I think to your point, Babish, we are seeing a lot of service providers collaborating with their clients to co-innovate on offerings. So it's just both the organizations coming together, building their strengths. One is bringing the industry expertise, other is bringing the technology expertise, and combining it to build a more greener future for each other. So yes, I think a lot of innovative work happening, lot of impactful things happening despite all the cost-centric stuff we talked about. And I'll be within sustainable technology services practice and Everest Group. We are covering this space in a lot more detail. I think Ambika highlighted the talent for. We do have a thought leadership coming up on what's the talent ecosystem for sustainability looks like, and how can service providers and enterprises build the right sustainable talent pool for their net zero offerings. And we will be happy to have a conversation with you, with the audience, if you're keen to understand what all we are doing in this space, and we will be happy to assist you on your journey as well.
Yeah, and anyone in the audience, if you have any questions or would like to have those conversations with us, please feel to reach out via LinkedIn, via email. You'll have our details in the description of this event. And just to go back to the peak matrix assessment that we have, highlighted a couple of times in this LinkedIn Live, we recently published the Net Zero Consulting Services Peak Matrix Assessment and had a lot of great, conversations during the course of that, and a lot of great observations as well. And we would be happy to discuss those with you. So please feel to reach out to us. And thank you so much, Babish, for doing this with us, and Arpita as well. This has been a great conversation, and I hope it was helpful to the audience.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
very much.
much.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.